One of the things that I've always thought is that trade unions don't actually get a fair crack of the whip in the media. It's partly their own fault in some ways, because it is very difficult sometimes to entice trade union leaders to do any interviews whatsoever. But we are in the company of somebody who delights doing them with me. It's Dave Ward, General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. Good to see you again.
Good evening, Nick.
It's been a long time, hasn't it?
It certainly has, yeah. I think the last time I was actually on one of your shows speaking, we were about to go on strike. We'd got a mandate from the membership, and I think you was having a go at me, basically, saying
Surely
it was
not.
outrageous.
Surely
The
not.
pandemic had just started, and we actually didn't go on strike in the end.
So you took my advice.
No, we didn't
Excellent.
take your advice. we took our own view into account around what was the best thing for people, the membership. And it resulted in us putting forward a plan that Royal Mail could be used as an additional emergency service during the pandemic. The workers done a great job, as did our members in BT, and our financial services members, who are all designated as key workers and worked throughout the pandemic and kept the country connected. And we ended up getting an excellent agreement that gave our members job security, a really good pay rise, an hour off the working week, and we completely changed the strategy of the company from one that was about managed decline. The CEO who was running that strategy was forced out of the company, and we got a deal with a new team. So it shows you that trade unions are relevant. In BT recently, through the strength of our membership, collectivism, all coming together, we've managed to stop and pause at the moment BT's plans to make our members compulsory redundant. And
Is this another one of
close
these
sites.
fire and rehire situations?
It could develop into that, at some point. But this was about absolutely compulsory redundancies in a company that's made £1.8 billion pre-tax profit, just announced, and site closures. And through the strength of our membership being engaged with the union, we forced BT back to the table. Unions are more relevant than ever. The trade union movement, I think, has done exceptionally well during the course of the pandemic. TUC and unions have stepped up. We've had direct talks with the government over the furlough scheme. I don't think that would have appeared in that way had that pressure not been there. And obviously safe working guidelines, the TUC and our safety reps all around the country in all different trade unions have been at the centre of keeping workers safe.
Well, lots to get our teeth into
Yep.
there. Let's throw the number out, because I'm sure there'll be people that want to ask you a question, whether they're your members or not. 0345 6060973. Dave Ward's here with me until 10 o'clock. I'm just going back to this agreement that you did with Royal Mail, because
Yeah.
I can remember when we last did one of these phone-ins, which must have been in February, was it, last year?
Yeah, I think
So
it
a
was
long time
around
ago.
about early March.
And you I don't think you were very hopeful then of getting anything, and you weren't getting any sort of the signals that you would need to get an agreement. So was it just a change of management at Royal Mail that brought this about?
No, I
or
think
just
it was,
your excellent negotiating
it was,
skills?
No, it was the strength of the members. I mean, look, the membership voted in a 75% turnout, 97% in support of strike action. Thankfully, in the end, we didn't have to go on strike. But what it proved to the company was that they'd lost the confidence of the workforce, and that led to the CEO at the time, who just wanted to really basically abandon Royal Mail as the company it is today and turn it into just another parcel courier. And I think he had more ambitions internationally than protecting the universal service in the UK. And it would have been all the normal things, lower terms and conditions, anything that grows in the company was going to be put into a new company and just let Royal Mail wither on the vine. In the end, the pressure, I think, of the workforce brought about a situation where he went. He was forced out of the company.
But who forced him out?
Well, I'm going to say to you that the feelings of the membership played a big part in that. And I think other managers, I think the board had to look at it, and I think the board took a decision in the end that he was adopting the wrong strategy.
So it's a bright new future then?
For Royal Mail, I think it's a good moment. It's an opportunity to expand the role of postal workers. That's what the deal's about, as well as giving them job security. I think it's about utilising what a postal worker does on the doorstep. They own trust on the doorstep with customers. And can we build that, as well as delivering letters, as well as obviously delivering parcels and packets? This is a good deal for the customer as well, because we've been flexible in recognising the changes that are going to need to be made. That may include, sort of 7-day working as well, with proper shift patterns, though, not where people are forced into things that they don't want to do. And it's all about, can we build a new portfolio of services for Royal Mail? Can postal workers, for example, deliver medicines, help people who are vulnerable, help the elderly? We're really interested in talking to businesses about what particular services could be tailored to their needs more in local communities, in areas where there's going to be perhaps some regional growth. I think it's a bright future if we stick to the agreement, and if we're willing to also recognise that we've got a part to play in making sure that we are innovative. And the CWU as a union has always been that way.
And is this in part also about the response to the competition? Because there was a time when really the Post Office, Royal Mail, however it was structured, didn't have any competition to speak of. But of course that's not the case anymore. So you've got Hermes, Yodel, all these other companies leeching business because they're providing it often at a much cheaper cost, and therefore service is absolutely crucial for the Royal Mail offering.
Yeah, I think that it's a response to competition, it's a response to privatisation. We were privatised in 2013, and what most companies do when they are privatised, they start to break up the rest of the company, they franchise out certain elements of it, and you could have easily seen a postal worker's role could have become a sort of franchise delivery route where the individual themselves owned the route. And we got into the race to the bottom on terms and conditions and all the things that you see the competition doing. We've won that battle. We've stopped that happening. Now, I'm not saying it'll never come back on the table again, but our job now, I think, is to respond to competition by trying to up the wages of the competitors and the workers. There's 60,000 jobs, I think, have been created in the sector through the increase in parcel deliveries and online shopping. And we estimate that probably around 50,000 of those jobs are all based on insecure, bogus self-employment models. These are in the competition. And this is where people come to work. They don't have any holiday pay, don't have any sick pay, they don't have any annual leave unless they find their own cover for it. These are the things that have got to fundamentally change. We shouldn't see that as competition. We should see that as, the complete wrong approach to the world of work today. And our union, along with other trade unions, want to set out how we should go about changing the whole world of work, rebalancing back in favour of workers. And we're talking about developing a new deal for working people, their families and the country. And actually we want to take on Boris Johnson on the levelling up agenda, but we're going to do it properly.
Okay, well let's actually, because I've been doing quite a lot on that in another environment recently, so let's talk about that in a moment. But how many Hermes drivers do you have as members?
We haven't got any Hermes drivers as members. There's another union that deals with Hermes at the moment. But what we are talking about, what we're talking about is actually...
Shouldn't you put your tanks on? Who is it?
We don't want internal competition here between unions. I think GMB and Unite have some interest in Hermes.
You don't want to put your tanks on their lawn, do you?
Actually, what we're doing is talking about the three unions cooperating across the whole sector, setting out minimum standards for any company who operates in that sector. And we're going to tackle this properly. We're going to set standards of employment that all the competitors in what is a growing sector should be held to account on. So that's good trade unionism. That's not internal competition. That's us working together to stand up for all workers.
Now, we've talked a lot in the past about the Labour Party. Obviously, trade unions heavily involved in the Labour Party, not just financing it, but in other ways as well. We're 14, 15 months into Keir Starmer's leadership now. If we'd had this conversation before Christmas, I would have probably been saying to you, well, he's doing quite a good job, isn't he? You were wrong to back Rebecca Long-Bailey. But you're now going to tell me that you're absolutely right, aren't you?
Well, I don't think that's the key point, really. I think it's about where the Labour Party go. And the problem that the Labour Party faces has been decades in the making. I'm not convinced personally that an immediate change of leadership is the answer to that. But I do think that Keir has to acknowledge that he stood on a ticket of unifying the party. He stood on a ticket of still transformative policies. And he was going to do it in a more professional way and relate to people. And I think what he's done in the time that he's been elected, probably on the advice of people around him, is tell everybody that he's not Jeremy Corbyn. At the same time, Boris Johnson has stolen a march on the levelling up agenda. Now, you would think that Labour would have been able to set out a clear vision on what it stood for, with particularly for working people in the red wall seats, working people everywhere, by the way, working class people. And I think they failed to do that. So, this is well documented now. I think what we've got to do as a trade union movement is perhaps lead the way. So, I'm all up for, I want us to stay within the Labour Party. Our branches and members, they'll decide ultimately whether that's the right decision. We do that in a democratic way. But I would be arguing that we stay within the Labour Party. I don't want to personally get too embroiled in sort of all the infighting that goes on. We've got more important things to do. We're not going to wait for political change. So I'm advocating that trade unions come together and we set the path that Labour needs to follow in how it reconnects with working class people.
How is that different to what's happened in the past, though?
Well, I think how it's different is that we need a distinct trade union agenda. One, I was speaking about it earlier on. Unions within the TUC are talking about this at the moment, about a new deal for working people, about setting out shared industrial and political demands that we would campaign for, that we would get people behind whatever political party they voted for. And I think we can do that.
That's very interesting that you put it like that.
It is interesting, yeah, I agree.
And I think you've put it like that because you have worked out, unlike many people in the Labour Party, that 48% of working class people vote Conservative. And therefore, presumably, I don't know whether it's 40%, 48%, 56% of your members probably vote Conservative as well. So therefore, you shouldn't just be trying to influence the Labour Party. You've got to influence Boris Johnson because of the electoral arithmetic shows. It's not me, someone on the right saying this. It's just as clear as night follows day that the next election, whenever it comes, is more likely to be won by the Conservatives than not at the moment. Now, that could change, but I'm not sure I can see that change happening in time. So therefore, if you want to have any real influence over what happens, you've got to influence Conservative government policy.
Yeah, we've got to influence change, for me. And I've always believed that we can make change happen. I think where trade unions are different and why my time will be focused on this, as well as continuing to be a member of the Labour Party. But this is the key focus for me. It is because we don't do politics in theory. We don't do it in ways where, you can't really change anything until you have an election. We can change things on the ground now. And I think one of the big lessons that is clearly there for everybody to see from the pandemic is that there's a deep imbalance of power and wealth in this country, and it permeates the world of work, how the economy operates, and society in general. And, I've got a feeling that most people are actually in the place where they want to see change. And I think where trade unions are different is we can force that change on the ground.
But they also think, and this is where Labour has really had problems, I think, over the last few years. They think that the Conservatives are more likely to be the driver of that change than Labour.
I think you've got to accept that the current polls would suggest that's true. So I'm not saying that your analysis there is wrong. What I am saying is I think people will eventually be disappointed when it comes to the levelling up agenda. Boris Johnson had a great opportunity the other week in the Queen's speech to set out proposals to improve workers' rights. He could have banned fire and rehire. That's levelling up when you take actions like that. He chose not to do that. And, I think that it falls upon the trade union movement at the moment and other organisations that support collectivism. I'm thinking of food bank organisations, I'm thinking of renters associations. I think there's been a growth in collectivism during the pandemic. And I think our job is to harness that collective strength.
Well, I think you're right. And I also think that there's been a sea change in attitudes with some people within government who, I gather Frances O'Grady, the head of the TUC, she's been involved in almost daily conversations with the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. That would never have happened. And I think the pandemic has changed attitudes.
It never happened previously with a Tory government, as far as I'm aware. But I've been involved in discussions with government ministers, not on a daily basis.
Well, we'll get all the details of that in just a moment, Dave.
So,
0345 6060 973. It's 18 minutes.
Britain's Conversation. Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
21 minutes past 9. We'll come to your calls in a moment. We're with Dave Ward, General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. Joseph says, well done to Iain Dale for having a workers' voice on. Dave, if Keir Starmer's Fly on the Wall documentary goes ahead, what role would you like to have?
I'll probably be in it somewhere, but I don't know. I wouldn't likely be seen. We'd probably be having some discussions about Brexit and the mistakes that Labour Party made and Keir made during that position.
Do you think he can ever recover from that? Because that's the problem, isn't it? In these red wall seats, the Conservatives won them, at least in part due to Brexit. And of course, he was the architect of Labour's policy. That's the problem they've got, isn't it?
A Fly on the Wall documentary, by the way, for Keir might turn out to be something like The Office Series 3. You never know. I think Brexit's really, really difficult because I think they spent so much of their time more or less suggesting that, the only way forward was to stay in Europe. And I understood that debate. I voted Remain. But I didn't think it was as clear cut as what people were saying. There were arguments that people put forward that were right. And I suppose where Labour, what I think people feel now is that how can Labour then, at this point in time, set out a vision that they believe, that you can still rebuild the UK out of Europe. And I think that's a real challenge for the Labour Party. But it can be done. And, they've got to rise to that challenge. What I'm going to keep returning to, Ian, is that I think the trade union movement needs to rise to that challenge now, irrespective of whether unions affiliate to the Labour Party or not.
How has the last year been for you personally in a working environment? If you had to do everything via Zoom, presumably you haven't been able to go around visiting your various branches or whatever.
Yeah, no, we've not been able to do that. I've done loads of the Zoom meetings. I'm back into work now. I missed being at work. I miss getting out and seeing people. I think that's really difficult. My own circumstances didn't allow me to do that, like a lot of people. And you miss a lot on the Zoom meetings when you're trying to deal with problems, when you're trying to take people's views into account. Sometimes when you're in the room, we've had negotiations. The Royal Mail negotiations I was talking about, they were done mostly over Zoom meetings.
Well, that worked out all right.
Well, it did. We did have some meetings face to face, and we had a few chats as well along the way that opened the door to some of these things. So, look, you have to do what you need to do. It's been challenging, but I'm looking forward to getting back to meeting members, getting out and seeing people, which is something I've always believed in doing.
Right, do you want to put your headphones on?
Yeah.
Let's go to the calls. Sean is in Thurrock. Hello, Sean. You're a new caller.
Hi. Very interesting discussions and answers from Mr. Ward. But the major question for me, which you have touched upon slightly, is given the increasing distance that appears to now exist between traditional working class communities and what Keir Starmer's Labour appears to offer them, what role do you see the trade unions playing in bridging that gap in confidence? And how can the TUC act collaboratively to offer a new deal for workers?
Well, I think the key debate for trade unions is whether they've got the confidence to set out an agenda that's a distinct trade union agenda at this stage, that gives working people their voice back again. I mean, one of the things I can't have is like Boris Johnson running around pretending that he's like the voice of working people. I mean, how we've ever got into that position, God only knows. So we're going to do something about it, Sean. And one of the things that I think the TUC needs to do is to come together, use our collective strength, I think build support with all other organisations that have collective kind of principles at heart, good organisations who help people who are out there at the moment, food bank organisations I mentioned earlier on, renters associations. There's lots of organisations that want to do the right thing. Build that strength, base it around the world of work and the injustices that are in the world of work at the moment, and just get out and do it and start campaigning in a meaningful way, mobilising people. And the CWU is a union that can do that, and other unions are learning and have done that as well. And I think we'll make a difference if we set that out.
I'm overinterpreting this, but what I'm hearing from you is that you obviously have agendas. You want things that need to be done with the government, but it seems to me that the language is very different now to maybe a few years ago, that you want to kind of work with them rather than necessarily adopt a combative approach, which has always been, it seems to me, that there's always been this fight between unions and government. And it's sort of almost as if never the twain shall meet. Well, you've experienced over the last year that the twain can sometimes meet.
Yeah, but I'm saying something that I think will bring us into a position where we won't agree with the government. So I'm talking about a serious, ambitious agenda to change the balance of forces in the world of work. And I think we do that by a combination of being willing to talk to the government. You should never turn down talks with the government. I mean, we're often asking for those talks. I was explaining earlier on during the break that we're in the middle of some discussions at the moment on one of the industries where our members, where we represent our members. I won't go into that at the moment. But so, you have to do both. You have to campaign strongly. But my point is we can make change happen on the ground. We can force, I think, a Boris Johnson government to face up to the reality of the imbalance of power that exists in the world of work at the moment. And if they don't, I think we mobilise working people behind that agenda. Labour get on board with that agenda. Views change. And, I've got a view that Boris Johnson will do a lot of things if he thinks it's going to keep him in power.
He's a politician.
So, well, of course he is. And he's learnt that lesson. So what I'm saying is our agenda to bring about change, and you use a number of different ways of doing that. So, I don't want you running away with the idea that we're pals with the government. We are going to take the government on where we think they're wrong.
But okay, Sean, thank you very much for that. Let's move on to another caller. Let's go to David in Battersea. David, hi. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I'm sure the gentleman, your guest, means well. But to me, it sounds like a load of nonsense if I'm a voter, because I'm not a member of any union. So why would I want to vote for any party which is governed and guided by the union? The only thing I can associate with unions, being a Londoner, is a number of years ago, the underground strikes, and we were all held to ransom and people couldn't get to work because people were going on strike. I think non-union members, people who work in industries without unions, we don't like the unions, because of how we've been affected in it in some way. And I think this comment about, you're going to have to influence the Conservative Party, the unions, that's never going to happen, because in general, the Conservative voters most probably earn, on average, this is just a very wide sweeping statement, maybe more than the Labour Party voters, and they're not members of unions.
I'm not sure that's true anymore. I mean, I can't give you the evidence for this, but if you look at the Labour Party now, it is not the party of the working classes as it once was. You look at Labour Party membership, and I suspect that Labour Party members probably do earn a par with the Conservatives, but I can't prove that. I don't know what you think.
Well, that's good. I was born in the 60s. Both of my parents were immigrants, came here around 1950, and when I was old enough to vote in the very early 80s, like my father, I voted for Labour, and most immigrants who came here and had low-paid jobs, they voted for Labour. My father had qualifications, but they weren't relevant here. So he used to do rubbish jobs and studied at night to become an accountant. And he quickly realised that the Labour Party just wants to, and I see it, I've seen it over many years. The messages I get is just levelling things out, dumbing things down to make everyone at the same level. And Boris Johnson is definitely not perfect. Although I vote for the Conservative, I'm more than happy to criticise him and any Conservative MP for doing wrong, as we should all do for whatever party we vote. But, the Tories always want to bring things up and be positive and improve people. And the Labour Party is just like handing out benefits everywhere, and it's the party of benefits and not going to work.
Let's just quickly put that to Dave, because we have to go to the news in a second. But that shows the scale of not just your problem in convincing David that trade unions are relevant today, but it's a massive problem for the Labour Party, isn't it, what he said?
It's a problem. I wouldn't agree with David's analysis. And David, I don't know if you heard me speaking earlier. That's not nonsense. We've negotiated agreements that improve our members' pay, terms and conditions, reduce their working hours, are good for customers, are good for the company. And we've levelled people up in our industry. So it's not the employer that's done that, it's the trade union. And there are loads of examples across the country during the pandemic and before where it's what workers fight collectively together for that brings about good change. So I don't agree with your analysis of that. And maybe over time, when you start to hear about the campaign for a new deal for working people, their families and the countries as a whole, then you'll get behind that, irrespective of whether you voted Conservative.
Okay, David, thank you very much. I think one of the things that I take from that conversation is that people's voting habits are far less tribal than they used to be. That there are, he was a Labour voter, now a Conservative voter, but you get the right retail offering from another political party and people switch a lot more than they used to, I suspect. Anyway, we'll take more calls to Dave Ward in a moment. 0345 6060 973. It's 6 on LBC. Dave Ward is here, General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. You can find him on Twitter at Dave Ward GS. Luke is in Southend. Hello, Luke.
Hi, Ian. Cheers
Hi.
for taking me question.
Not at all. What would you like to ask?
No, I think it's great that you've got a workers' voice on tonight, and I hope many more presenters will do the same. My question to Dave is, what can the trade union movement do for young people who are forecast at the moment to be the first generation in probably a century to actually be worse off than their parents?
Well, this is where, Luke, I think the whole call for a new deal for working people and their families really hits home, because I think that is about changing the life chances for young people or improving the life chances for young people. I think trade unions can engage with young people by, like our own union, and all unions have their sort of young workers sections. And I think that we should be open to different, perhaps, structures, less formal structures to engage with young people. I think we should be looking to organise in sectors of the economy where more young people are working. A lot of trade unions are attempting to do that at the moment, and some are having a degree of success. But for me, I think it's about, listening to young people. One of the things that I'm interested in about the world of work is that there's been a huge focus for young people on education, rightly so, over many, many years. But actually, I think that's been at the expense sometimes about recognising that some young people want to get into decent jobs fairly quickly. So apprenticeships, trade unions should be pushing to bring back proper apprenticeships So I think there's a whole range of things that we can appeal to young people on.
I mean, the government actually don't have a bad record on apprenticeships, do they?
No, I don't think the government have got a good record on apprenticeships, but I don't think any government in the last probably 20 years, 30 years have had a good record on apprenticeships. The point I'm making is...
You've actually got the apprenticeships minister having been an apprentice herself.
Well, one person doesn't add up to
Well, she
a
is
good
the
record.
minister.
Well,
she's actually quite a good
well,
one,
then
isn't she?
she's going to listen to what I'm saying and really push the boat out for apprentice schemes. But employers, I mean, it's not about just the government here. It's about what trade unions negotiate with employers, whether employers want to go back to the days where there are proper apprenticeships. And this is something that I think the whole of the movement will get behind. It's one of the key policies that trade unions support. And I think it's going to be very beneficial to young people. So that's one way of definitely engaging with young people.
Luke, thank you. Let's go to Kenneth in Edinburgh. Hi, Kenneth.
Good evening, Ian, and good evening, Mr. Ward.
Good evening.
My question is going from the sort of negotiation side back to politics, and I'd be really interested to know if you think you can trace Labour's electoral issues back to electing the wrong Miliband brother as leader of the party. I just, since that point, it seems like there's been a procession of issues that have, drifted Labour further away from electoral success. And I wonder if he looks at Keir Starmer and looks him right in the eyes, whether he thinks that that's a person who can win a general election.
I think you can trace Labour's electoral problems back a little bit further than that. And I would say that it goes back towards the end of the Blair period.
The man who actually won 3 elections.
Yeah, but I mean, we've got to be honest about this. I think it was also the period where Labour started to move away towards the end of that period from working class people. So I would say...
Wasn't it more that Tony Blair was actually brilliant at constructing an electoral coalition, and that he allowed people who had been traditional Conservative voters to vote Labour again? And surely that was a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course it was a good thing. I mean, look, you have to build a coalition to win an election. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. But what I'm saying is, Kenneth asked a question directly about, did I think it was the moment when the wrong Miliband brother got elected? No, I don't. I think it goes back further than that. I think it goes back as well to the reality of these big multinational companies, the more power they've got. Potentially Labour, when it was in a position to sort of challenge some of those companies, didn't want to do that. So look, I think, the deindustrialisation of whole swathes of the country, all of these issues are part of it. The thing is now, I think it's time to look forward to the future, and I personally think that you need to have a leader in the Labour Party who's committed to transformative change. I do agree that you have to be able to put that across in a narrative that people will support and think it's achievable. But to do that, you've got to be doing that from the outset. You've got to have conviction, and then you can explain to people over a period of time that your policies are right. I mean, I think what's strange at the moment is that I've got to acknowledge that probably most people in the country are thinking that Boris Johnson has a more progressive position than the Labour Party. Well, you wouldn't say that purely on Boris Johnson's policies. You'd have to say that's because Labour walked away from working class people over a long period of time.
Kenneth, thank you very much. Very good question. Richard is in Suffolk. Hello, Richard.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, yeah. I'd like to speak to Dave. It's the first time. Sorry if I'm a bit crackly and stuff in my voice. I've got mental health problems, but it's the first time I've managed to get to speak to you. I've tried to make contact with you through the union, through emails. My emails were in 2017 regarding an employer that I've been working for and the bullying and such forth that have gone on. I was supposed to be supported by your union, and I've been completely failed, Dave. Completely failed. I've been pushed away. I've had one of your union reps screaming down the phone at me, telling me I'm mentally not right. The union doesn't want to support me, to cancel my membership, telling me that I'm trouble, just mocking my mental health. I'm sorry, it's the first time I've been able to come on to get a hold to speak to you. I've tried to email you. I've spoken to your legal services, the head of legal services. I won't say his name. I was abused by one of your union reps. It's disgusting what's gone on. I've also there's so much to do with court cases regarding I'll just say IPI, stuff like that you've looked after other members. You've promised me, I was promised the same support that these other members got. When the case was finished, you've just completely blocked me out, told me bits and bobs that, not you personally, Dave, but your union. It's just, I probably don't sound right, but honestly, I've been off work for 6 years. I'm on so much tablets, and this recording I've got of your union rep abusing me and telling me how you're not going to support me to cancel my membership. I put that through. That went to your head of legal services. He refused to listen to it at first.
Right,
then,
Richard. Let's put that to.
He spoke to your president, the lady, a president or something. She listened to it, and then they come back and said, "No, there's nothing wrong with that," saying that I was out of order. But I wasn't raising my voice in this call. Okay. I was being abused, and it's horrendous.
Richard, look, let me say it's difficult for me to make a judgment about your case. I'm sorry, I don't know the personal circumstances of it, but what I will say to you on the basis of, clearly you've set out some real concerns there, I will, if we speak to the producer afterwards, I'll make contact with you tomorrow, and we'll get our people looking at what your case is. I can't promise you anything because I don't know the details of it, but you clearly are very concerned, and we should address that. So let's have that conversation at some point tomorrow.
Right.
LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 9:49. It's worth saying, just as a response to the last caller, actually, that last time you were on, my producers just reminded me that we had, I won't say a similar call, but somebody had an issue, and you did take it up afterwards, and it was sorted out. So yeah. I know often sometimes I think people think, they say they're going to sort it out, but they never do. Well, you did. So I hope something can be done to help Richard once you find out the exact circumstances. Yeah. Let's take a text from Liam, who says, Dave Ward, one of the only Labour voices left who speaks any sense. If Labour listened to people like Dave and not has-beens like Peter Mandelson, I'd be more minded to vote for them. In the meantime, I'm sticking with Boris. Steve says, I'm a British gas worker who was sacked for refusing to sign a new contract which would have killed my home life. I want to say thank you so much for the CWU's support for our dispute. What can we do to end fire and rehire? I've now started my own business, by the way. Well, good on you, Steve. This fire and rehire thing, I find it unconscionable the way that some employers are handling this. You probably won't know this, but when all the British Airways thing was going on last year, this programme really took that up. And I shall we say, gave Willie Walsh the benefit of my views when I did a 25-minute 25-minute interview with him. Didn't make the blindest bit of difference, I have to say. But as somebody on the right who likes to believe that generally employers are fair-minded people, I cannot support what companies like British Gas, British Airways, and no doubt many others are doing in this way. But what can be done about it?
Well, you would have thought that Boris Johnson would have banned it, would have made it illegal. He had the opportunity to do that. So, they're not going to do that. But what I would say to Steve is, it's got to be one of the issues that the trade union movement get behind collectively. Sometimes in single companies, it's difficult to ultimately deal with those things and get the result you want. But collectively, if the union movement come together, that is one of the things. I mean, I've sat in meetings at the TUC where, General Secretary after General Secretary is saying, this is outrageous. I think there's something like 1 in 10 workers in the UK now potentially facing fire and rehire, where they get rid of people, no redundancy pay, rehire them, force them to either come in on less terms and conditions. It's got to be completely unacceptable.
See, I think
so. It's part of the New Deal campaign. We should be galvanising support. See, you made an interesting point. You get it. You're on the right.
But I think you get it. I think a lot of people on the right get this, and I think you're kicking at an open door.
Well, why did Johnson not ban it?
Well,
he had the opportunity 2 weeks ago.
Maybe he did, but there are many other people in the government who can put pressure on him. I mean, I don't know what his views are on this.
So what we got to do is get people behind a movement of people. I'll say this again, whatever political party you voted for, I don't think there's many people out there who are going to say that that's a right practice.
Exactly.
They'll be fully behind Steve. And we've got to change that. So, we didn't win that individual battle, but we can win it collectively by unions galvanising behind it.
I hope, Steve, that in 5 years' time you think that was the best thing that ever happened to you, because your business will be a massive success and you'll be absolutely rolling in it. That's what I hope happens anyway. Jane says, Iain, you're right that trade unions don't get a fair crack of the whip in the media. Good on you for getting people who represent workers on for a change. Shame we can't see Dave on the telly more often because he's very handsome. You've pulled. Well, you will be able to see him actually, because tomorrow this will be on the LBC YouTube channel and Global Players. So, Jane, you can get your fix of Dave there. Now, let's go to James in Watford. Hello, James.
Oh, good evening.
Hi.
I really think it's time that the Labour Party, along with the trade unions, celebrated the Labour Party's success historically. I think there's a perception amongst voters that the Labour Party doesn't like itself very much. And I think part of that is to acknowledge its history and what it's done well. Now, actually, you've partly answered my next bit. I was going to challenge you. Can you say something positive about Tony Blair, which you have actually done, acknowledging his 3 election wins? But given that he's Labour's most successful modern leader, is it time that trade unionists and Labour Party members acknowledge the success of history? That's not to go back to it, but just celebrated it. What do you think?
Well, I mean, trade unions celebrate struggles of working class people all the time. I mean, we just had May Day, where we celebrated the achievements of working class people, that have gone on for hundreds of years. So I don't think celebrating things is going to change the fortunes of the Labour Party. It's about doing things, and it's about coming up with policies, getting them out there and getting the trust of people again. And my point is that trade unions should lead the way in that debate, because we have the ability to actually make change happen whilst, not waiting for the next election. I don't believe you wait for political change. I'm a Labour Party member, have been for a long, long time, and will continue to be. But I have a job to do, which for me is about galvanising other trade unions into a collective fight to change the balance of forces in the world of work. It's about making contracts of work again, proper contracts like they used to be years ago. Now, you can celebrate the fact that we had, when I certainly first started working, you had a decent, stable job, you had job security, you had holiday pay, you had sick pay, you had a good pension. Well, we've got to fight to get those things back, and then people will start supporting us.
Okay, James, thank you very much. Text here, Iain, with the potential of drones and other tech for delivery in the future, are the more successful unions increasing wages, just speeding up the inevitable?
No, I don't think we are. I think that we recognise that the world is changing in our own industry, in Royal Mail. We've recognised that for many years. Often it's the union that calls for more change, But we want to see innovation in a way where, you know, the human part of this, the postal worker on the street, where we actually look at their role and we say, you know, we can expand your role as a postal worker. There's lots of different things a postal worker can be doing because they're trusted by the public, trusted in communities. And I think there's a real challenge for industry, and not just in the post, but not to write off sectors of the economy or industries. I think you can recreate the future. That's exactly what we've just done with the deal we've done with Royal Mail. It's a good deal for customers, good deal for the company, good deal for our members. And it's about creating a different future whilst recognising that there's change coming along as well.
Chris in Staines says, "Evening, Ian. I'm a BA flight attendant and BASA union member. You just said that your support of us and holding our management to task made no difference. However, all of the crew in BA definitely believe you did make a great difference by shaming Walsh and our management into treating us far more fairly than they ever intended to. A sincere thank you, Chris in Staines." Well,
I think the union would have
solidarity,
would have
comrade.
sorted out Walsh as well. He needed sorting out, Willie Walsh, didn't he? I mean, the guy is the wrong person to be leading industries. It
was such a shame in a way because he was incredibly successful in many ways, but he kind of threw it all away at the end. Yeah. But anyway, I wonder if when we next meet in maybe 3 or 4 months' time, if Keir Starmer will still be leader of the Labour Party. I won't put you on the spot on that, but we will soon see.